Really, Dovetail? Do you seriously think this is a good idea? Are you so desperate for money that you'll resort to yet another rehash of existing content? It's not funny anymore. So it looks like a second Loco Add-on Bundle is coming to TSW3, because the previous one was such a roaring success, and definitely not a lazy cash grab where people paid for locomotives we already have in the game. This time we'll be getting the EMD SD70 ACE in BNSF spec for Cajon Pass, the Class 37 in Zwoferink colours for Southeastern High Speed, and slight livery alterations for the Ice 1 and Ice 3 from Kassel to Würzburg. Whilst I will say that it's good to get more suitable motive power for Cajon Pass, especially since the EMD F7A didn't come with any period-accurate rolling stock, let's not forget the fact that we already have the EMD SD70 ACE in the game, though that was the Union Pacific variant supplied with Sherman Hill. Apparently there will be some changes to the model to accurately replicate the BNSF variant, and it's honestly surprising to hear DTG actually somewhat respecting the source material on an American locomotive. It's a little strange seeing the comparatively small paragraphs in the roadmap article talking about the SD70 ACE, only to find the much longer pieces on the Ice 3 and Class 37. Anyone would think that DTG can't be bothered giving the Americans the same amount of attention as the Germans and Brits. What the devs should have done instead of rehashing the EMD SD70 ACE is add a BNSF locomotive that we've never had in TSW before. Examples include the General Electric ET44C4 and EMD SD70 Mac. I should also clarify that the ES44C4 we already have is not the same as the ET44C4, as the latter has much larger radiators in order to be EPA Tier 4 compliant. The Zwoferink Class 37 is mildly interesting, although this will be the third time we've had a 37 in TSW. Other variants of the 37 already exist with the Tees Valley and West Cornwall routes, which are mediocre and downright horrendous respectively. Not to mention that this was another missed opportunity to include the Class 700, for Southeastern High Speed as well as London Commuter. Hint! This is a special variant of the 37 that has downer couplers, which means it can couple to EMUs and drag them to and from workshops for overhaul/refurbishment. It makes sense to include this on Southeastern High Speed, since the Zwoferink 37s did haul 375s off to Derby for their refurbishment and repaint. Speaking of which, DTG have said that they'll also be including a reskin for the Class 375/9, depicting the old Southeastern white livery. Of course they could only be bothered to supply a reskin of a unit we already have. Now before anyone tries and fails to accuse me of being an entitled brat, I will remind you that Southeastern have 5 variants of the 375 rather than just 1. It seems that DTG only bothered to stop at 1 store instead of 5 or 6. This would have been a good opportunity to include at least 2 other variants of the 375, namely the 375/3 and 375/6. Especially the 375/3, because then DTG may finally have the motivation to add the Sheerness branch. Another thing I don't like is the fact that we'll only be getting 37-800 and 37-884 in this pack, though it wouldn't be historically accurate to include 37-901 Merley's Pioneer as well. As indicated by that name, the former 37150 doesn't have the traditional English Electric prime mover anymore. The German side of this add-on bundle is just a joke. You only get reskins, well, not really reskins, just slight livery alterations, for the Ice 1 and Ice 3. The former is being done up with that extra green stripe around the cab front as part of Deutsche Bahn's climate protection, while the Ice 3's red stripe has been repainted in rainbow colours to celebrate the 10th anniversary of Deutsche Bahn's Railbow initiative. Now don't get me wrong, I'm a fan of pride liveries, and I support what the LGBT community stands for, but I don't see why DTG are including this in a payware bundle. I reckon it should have been given out as a free update for the route. After all, we've already given these lazy and greedy sods God knows how much money, so we should get at least one free livery or piece of motive power every once in a while. I don't think these livery alterations will replace the default liveries in timetable mode, but still, how does DTG seriously expect people to pay for something as small as differently coloured stripes? I get the feeling that DTG are really desperate to retain interest in TSW3's core routes, which are all fairly disappointing in their own ways. For instance, I don't like Kassel to Würzburg because, whilst it is the longest route in the game, it only has 3 stations and only takes around an hour to complete. Not to mention the incredibly boring scenery, which barely changes from speeding through long tunnels or across tall bridges. As for why I don't like Cajon Pass, it's yet another route that is focused solely on those really long and heavy American freight trains, which are really hard to drive if you're not familiar with them. I'll bring up another thing DTG should have added instead of an SD70 ACE reskin. The Amtrak P42DC and Superliner coaches. You know, something actually new to the game that would make the route more realistic than just focusing on freight again. In real life, Amtrak's Southwest Chief operates over the San Bernardino to Barstow section as part of its run from Chicago to Los Angeles. Considering that DTG and Amtrak went to the effort of decorating a real ACS-64 in a special promotional livery, it's absolutely shocking that we still have barely any Amtrak routes and rolling stock in TSW. I really hate DTG's trend of missing good opportunities. Southeastern High Speed is a route we already had in TSW2. Whilst it was about time DTG extended the HS1 coverage to Ashford, it only takes around 45 minutes to complete the journey down from St Pancras, or as I call it St Pancreas, because of the high speeds. Not to mention the glaring lack of the Sheerness branch and the missing link between Faversham and Ashford. Like I've said before, there was absolutely no reason whatsoever to leave out the Sheerness branch, especially since it was present in the original TS Classic version of London to Faversham. As much as I hate buying into these cash grab add-ons, I will say that I'm interested in the Eurofenix 37 and being able to do EMU drags. And the Class 37 is one of my favourite British diesels, so I'll probably get that side of the pack. However, I will not do the same for the SD70 ACE and ICE 3 livery alterations. Oh, by the way, Dovetail, these are not brilliant ways to add more to the experience, quoting from the roadmap article. What is it with these people and always shoehorning in these unneeded adjectives? Quite frankly, I actually want this add-on bundle to be a failure by barely selling any copies. That way the devs might finally get the message that these sorts of lazy content rehashes are not good enough, and they need to do better if they have any hope in hell of staying in business well into the future.